Last time on anime fans around the world. Anime is unknown to the majority of Swiss civilians.
Alright, so anime and manga representation in the United Kingdom.
German dubs are very well done. In Spain, anime has been airing on TV since the late 80s. From time to time, Swedish TV channels will air anime series with the original Japanese cast with English subtitles.
There are several big film festivals that Scotland puts on every year.
Heyo guys, I know it's been quite some time since we last continued the series. In fact, I think the first episode came out in 2018. The biggest thing that kept me from continuing the series is that my original script was deleted. But then all the hard work that the YouTubers that I was going to feature in the original episode 2 would have been for nothing, and I thought that wasn't right. So I decided to continue the series, but this time having this episode be only with the YouTubers who were supposed to be featured years ago. Not just that, but I actually want to continue this series. But to continue the series, I need your help. Send me an email at sloan_lester@yahoo.com telling me where you're from, if you have a YouTube channel or not. Because if you do have a YouTube channel, then that means you can record your own segment for the video. And everything about what it's like to be an anime fan in your country. Do you guys have English dubs? Are there stores where you can buy anime merch? Do you have anime conventions? Do you have song concerts? Meetups? Is there a lot of fans? Do you get to see voice actors? Just all of the above. The more detail as possible, the better chance you got at getting into one of my videos. Come on guys, let's bring this series back. Just a reminder, of course, we already did Europe, and you're going to see the next couple of countries for this episode of Pacific Rim, as well as South Africa. All right, with all that said, let's get started. Finally.
Howdy guys, my name is Tony Wally II, also known as the Black Critic Guy here on YouTube. And yes, that is me, standing in a parking garage, staring wondrously at the sun. Ain't I deep? But if that's not islandy enough for your taste, how about this shot? Is this more to your liking? It is? Wonderful! Then let's continue. I'm here at the behest of my good friend Sloan the Female Otaku to talk about the nerd and anime culture as it exists here on the lovely island of Guam. That's what the natives call this island. And of course, I can't refuse a request from one of my favorite people to watch and talk to on the platform. Now, when it comes to the nerd and anime culture here on Guam, it isn't that different from the one in the United States. I would say it's a more smaller, condensed version of what you would find in the States. And we also get the same things that you guys get. Netflix, Hulu, Crunchyroll. Sometimes we get it later than you guys, other times we get it earlier than you guys. And since we do live relatively close to Japan, we're a 5-hour flight away, we get a lot of Japanese tourists and celebrities, and their culture also follows them. But even without the Japanese influence, anime and manga is extremely popular, beloved, and influential on the island of Guam. Now, the anime and nerd culture on Guam had a very slow start. It began in the late 90s, early 2000s with some small mom and pop stores selling bootleg copies of the Japanese versions of some of our favorite anime. I remember going to some of these. It was called the Goku store, and I bought some copies of the Boo Saga before it was released on TV, but it was the Japanese version, which threw me off, and the quality was a bit stale. It was very cheap looking. But it was actually pretty exciting. These were places that I can actually go to watch some anime and be caught up with things. And also back in the day too, when MySpace was a thing, that's actually where I saw episodes of Naruto. Because there wasn't, again, a lot of stores that sold anime DVDs or sold manga and stuff like that. In fact, the only place that I remembered growing up, and they still do it to this day, that sold manga was this small bookstore here on Guam called Bestseller. They actually had their own shelves full of anime, from Naruto to One Piece to some obscure mangas that I've never heard of that made me curious to read and check them out. So I thank Bestseller for actually giving us the choice, or actually providing some manga for people starving to read some manga. In fact, I used to go there frequently to buy new volumes of Negima. I was really into Negima when I was in high school. But now on Guam, we have so many new anime nerd stores for us to geek out, buy the items that we always want to have, and embrace the nerd in us. Speaking of geek out, one of the biggest nerd stores on the island is a place called Geek Out that sells a variety of different items: wallets, lanyards, pictures, plushes, pillows, you name it, figurines. They have it all. And it's not just anime. They have things from movies, TV shows, video games, anything that you want that you could possibly nerd out about. I even bought myself a REM wallet from Geek Out itself. And speaking of REM, hello there. Okay, calm down there, buddy. It's just a pillow. Just calm down now. Another nerd store that I frequent quite often is a place called Gifforia. Now, from the sound of it, it seems like a store meant for children. And while it does have stuff that little kids can get into, it also has things that nerds can embrace, like figurines, build sets, Funko Pops, nerd hats, and a wide variety of plushes, even some Disney plushes that I thought looked really cute. And now let's talk about the many conventions that happen here on Guam. Unfortunately, I haven't been to any of the big conventions as of yet. I just moved back, so I'm still kind of getting my bearings and trying to learn when the big events will be coming. But I have spoken to many of the people involved in the nerd anime community on Guam, and they have said nothing but positive things for each of the conventions that they have attended. Mostly because they're just excited that we actually get these conventions, that we meet people who love to cosplay, who love to build models, who also share the same hobbies as us, like the same animes as us. Because remember, we didn't get a lot of conventions back in the past. Most of us, we kind of kept it to ourselves, or we talked about it amongst friends, but we never really had a place where we all could gather and just express our love for nerd culture and anime culture and all that stuff. Now we get conventions like Otaku Recon, EpicsCon, and NeoCon. Those are the three big ones that happen on Guam. I've also been to some small conventions here on Guam. I helped out with HeroCon back in 2017. I did a little Q&A kind of trivia game there. It was a whole lot of fun just playing with other people, doing the whole performance and helping out with the event. I met a lot of great people, wonderful people that are now my friends. I also attended a very, very, very small convention called Press Play Con, which wasn't as good as HeroCon, but I was delighted at the effort. And I mean, it took place at a gymnasium in a high school, so of course the location was pretty small, so the event was going to be pretty small. So I was happy for that, and I was glad to just be at it. And that pretty much does it for the nerd anime culture here on the lovely island of Guam. Not much different from that of the States, but I am happy that we're fully embracing it more than we did in the past. Thank you for having me on, Sloan, and I'll see you again. Peace!
Guys, I'm Bibi and I live in a small country called New Zealand. We are pretty close to Australia and we share the same DVD and Blu-ray regions. We also share the same distributors, being Madman, Siren Visual and Hanabi. There are a few other media distributors that own the rights to some series, such as Roadshow, who own JoJo's, and Sony Pictures, who own the Railgun franchise. Anime doesn't really have a big mainstream following here, and this becomes evident when you're trying to buy merchandise. You'll be lucky to find a stray Dragon Ball Z DVD on the shelves at the warehouse, which is our equivalent to Target. JB Hi-Fi is the only chain store that specialises in anime DVD and Blu-rays, although it's around about 90% Madman titles. The main way anime tends to be purchased here is straight from the distributor. Madman has both a New Zealand website as well as an Australian website to purchase from. Madman also has a merch store where you can buy plush toys, figurines and the like. And as for Siren Visual and Hanabi, we have to order from Australia. Because New Zealand is a separate country from Australia with different criteria for age ratings, the distributors have to first get their titles reclassified if they want to sell them here. This can be expensive, and historically we have banned titles such as Mark and Key and High School DxD due to outdated legislations. This makes distributors nervous, and often the risk isn't worth it to them. As a result, we usually end up missing out on titles such as Oremo or Queensblade. We also tend to have anime release a lot later here. For example, Overlord, Digimon Adventure Tri Part 3, and Sword Art Online Ordinal Scale are all releasing in March in Australia, We're lucky if we end up getting it a few months later. If you prefer to stream your anime, we have the three usual sites: Crunchyroll, Netflix, and Amazon Prime. We also have Hulu, as well as a site called Anime Lab, which is owned by Madman. Funimation is sadly unavailable to us, and at the moment I'm only signed up to Crunchyroll. In the past, I have signed up to Anime Lab, but unfortunately Anime Lab doesn't really get a large amount of seasonals, so I only really sign up to them when I have something that I really want to watch. Netflix for New Zealand isn't anywhere near as good as America's Netflix. We don't get as many seasonals or movies, to be honest, so I don't sign up to Netflix. And as for Amazon, well, Amazon isn't really that popular here in New Zealand, so Prime isn't very appealing to me and not really worth my money at this point in time. And as for Hulu, I've never used Hulu, so I don't know what it's like. Manga is hard to get here. We do have specialty bookstores that have a small selection of manga and light novels, and when I tried to get in the first volume of The Melancholy Haruhi Suzumiya, they said it was going to cost $50, which is expensive. The other options we have are Madman Australia, and maybe your local comic book store if you're lucky. We don't have a Hot Topic here, so we have to rely on our EB Games, which is essentially GameStop for you guys, to get in Pokemon merchandise as well as the odd anime pop vinyl. Pokemon clothing occasionally pops up at JJ's, which is a clothing chain store here in New Zealand, and no chain store sells figures, that I know of at least. However, we do have local hobby stores that do sell figures as well as other anime merchandise. They're in different cities around the country. I don't know any that are in Christchurch, which is a real shame. If any of you are from New Zealand and you do know of some, let me know. We do have conventions here in New Zealand, with the three biggest cities getting them yearly, and then the smaller cities have them a little bit more irregularly. They're not anime conventions per se, they encompass pop culture as a whole. The Armageddon Expo sports a large amount of anime, gaming, sci-fi, and fantasy guests and vendors, as well as wrestling and horror, just for good measure. The convention is also a great place to see cosplayers, and they have quite a thriving community. Every convention has a cosplay competition, which is so much fun to go and watch, and it has so many different prizes. Each regional winner also gets invited to the Cosplay Cup and gets to go overseas, and there are even bigger prizes at stake for this one. The last winner was from my hometown Christchurch, and she actually has a small YouTube channel where she shows off how she made her costume and some of her future projects, so if you want to find her, you can find her at Tea Cake. The last thing I want to mention about conventions here in New Zealand is that they're not as large as America or Japan. We don't have to wait for hours on end just to get into the convention hall, and we also don't have to wait for very long to get into any of the panels that we want to go to. Granted, because we do have a smaller convention, we don't get as many larger voice actors like Monica Ryle or J. Michael Tatum, who I'd love to see by the way, but we do get a great assortment of voice actors as well as TV actors and some movie stars. The convention scene in New Zealand may be small, but it's pretty good. I'd like to thank Sloane for having me on her channel, and I hope that you guys did enjoy finding out more about New Zealand and anime in a smaller country. If you want to know who I am, I'm Bibi from Bibi's World, and you can find me at this channel here. So from Moe to Mika, thanks for watching, and I'm sure that I'll see you guys next time.
Hey guys, what is happening? My name is Animetal Viking, and I am a YouTuber from South Africa who makes videos mainly about anime and heavy metal music. Before I get any further into this segment, I would just like to thank Sloane for granting me the privilege to speak to you all and just talk about what life is like for your average otaku living in South Africa. I will be keeping this segment rather brief, but if you want to see me make a full video going more in depth on the scene in my country, then feel free to let me know on my Facebook or Twitter pages. Now, with the formalities aside, let's get into this. Anime and manga are unfortunately not one of the most popular forms of entertainment in South Africa, along with many other scenes in pop culture with the exception of movies, local and mainstream music, television, and video games. So the community is rather small, just like our comic book scene and heavy metal scene, and you'll be very lucky to run into maybe one of us otaku as we are scattered across the 9 provinces that make up the country. Despite all this, we do have a few select stores that sell anime and anime related media here. However, most of them are located in the province where I live, Gauteng, and you have to drive out quite some distance just to get there. The name of this store is Anime Works, and they currently have 3 stores open across the province the last time I checked. As for the other provinces, I cannot say, as I haven't travelled much outside of my own province, and the few Facebook groups dedicated to South African anime fans have become quite inactive in the past several years. Anime Works is probably the only reliable store in the country, as they have a great selection of new anime on DVD and Blu-ray, while having the odd classic title here and there. They also sell figurines, games, shirts, and a plethora of other related merch. The only downside to their store is that the classic shows are often second-hand returns, and while they generally do a good job in making sure that the products are in good condition before being traded in or returned, there are some times where even I found myself questioning whether to purchase the product or not. Otherwise, no one has any complaints about them really. When it comes to streaming and other digital services here, we do have access to services such as Crunchyroll, Netflix, and Hulu, but because of licensing restrictions, we don't have access to the same number of shows and features that our US and Canadian counterparts do. So, more often than not, the use of pirate streaming and download sites is a common one, though it's only been happening in recent years since the internet in South Africa wasn't as fast as its first world counterparts, nor were uncapped data packages a possibility until somewhere between 2010 and 2012. Another luxury of otaku culture we don't get to enjoy in South Africa is conventions. The only event similar to a convention that people living in Johannesburg or Cape Town get to enjoy is the annual Rage Expo. This expo is mostly centered on gaming, and the main attraction is generally the massive NAG magazine LAN party, where gamers bring their PCs and play multiplayer games throughout the course of the entire weekend that the event is hosted. While artists, Anime Works, and other merch outlets are present at the event along with cosplayers, the expo is more about pop culture in general, with gaming as its main focus. If there are any smaller conventions that I am unaware of, they are probably only known by the locals in specific towns due to a lack of advertising and promotion. On the topic of dubbing, it isn't necessary for anime to be dubbed into other languages, since South Africa has 11 official languages and most of the population has at least some basic understanding of English. The only time an anime was dubbed here in South Africa was Heidi, and it was dubbed into Afrikaans, which is a derivative language of Dutch. Other reasons that contributed to a lack of community growth include the international sanctions and strict censorship laws that were commonplace in the apartheid era, the shutdown of Animax in 2010 due to how poorly it was managed and presented, and finally the fact that the SABC, which was responsible for introducing Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon to the country on its morning and afternoon kids segments, is now one massive clusterfuck of poor management, decision making, and the sudden push to show 90% local content, which has raised questions of censorship and propaganda towards the broadcasting company in recent years. So, other than forums, blogs, and other social media platforms, it's safe to say that anime fans in South Africa don't seem to be as tightly connected as those in other countries where the medium is starting to become mainstream. While it really is a shame that South African otaku don't get to enjoy the easier access that their international counterparts do, there is still an upside to all of this, as there are still fans who are dedicated to bringing anime and manga into our local scene and still try to encourage interaction among members of the community. This is something that I have been trying to do myself for the past 3 years, and I'm happy to say that with each passing year, I'm slowly but surely starting to meet new people who share the same passion and love for this medium as I do, and of course for the music that I enjoy as well. Thanks again for watching, and thanks again Sloan for having me on your video. This was a really fun project, and I do hope that those of you watching found this informative. Have a kick-ass day, and stay metal!
Thank you again so much to the following YouTubers for giving me their take. I know it came out super late, but I'm really glad to finally show it to the world. Once again, if you want to be a part of the next episode, make sure you send me an email at sloan_lester@yahoo.com telling me everything about the country that you're from and what it's like being an anime fan over there. If you don't have a YouTube channel, that's totally fine. You can still just write me a good old paragraph and then I can make my own recording for you. Or maybe you don't have a camera, but you do have a mic. Feel free to send me a recording. I won't get back to everyone, but if I do get back to you, then that's a good sign. I want to give a very special shout out to Sarah Hogan and Giovanni Herrera for donating to my Patreon. If you'd like a very special shout out in the next video, stream, or what have you, then please click on the Patreon link in the description to donate, as well as links to my social media. I'm your female otaku. Sayonara.